This video is a walkthrough of how to extract data from Salesforce using the Salesforce Data Loader command line utility. There's a couple of files that I'm going to be using during this video. One's a process configuration file and the other is a batch file to run the process. You can download copies of those. Go to flyingpuma.com, click on the links tab, and there's a link there to download a zip file. You're free to look at the configuration file and the batch file and modify them for your own use. For this walkthrough, I'm going to extract a custom object out of Salesforce, and I'll show that to you here. The object is a widget, and I'll show you some of the data. There's only 3 records in here. I'll show you the structure of this. The API name is widget _C. There's minimal fields in here. Widget name, description, contact. There's a contact lookup, and then the ownership and auditing fields that are built into Salesforce. So this is what I'm going to extract, and we'll kick this out to a comma delimited CSV file on the machine that I'm running the data loader on. There are a couple of prerequisites to running the data loader. You need to have Java installed in your PC, and you also need to have the data loader utility. If you're not sure if you have Java or if you need to update it, head over to java.com, and there's a download link right on their page. But also, if you there's a link there that says "Do I have Java?" If you go there, you can verify whether or not your PC is running Java, and even if you have the most up-to-date version. And there's some more information here also about Java. If you download it here, it tells you what you're going to get, and that is the Java runtime environment. And if you read the Salesforce documentation, that's what it is that it tells you we need. So head over to java.com, verify your Java installation, and then the second thing that we need obviously is the data loader utility, and that is downloaded straight from Salesforce. So I'm going to go into the Lightning experience here. If I go into setup, I can use the quick find box. If I start typing in data loader, and I can see that below there. And when I click on that, it will give me the link to download the utility. And the command line version of this, from what I've read, does not work on a Macintosh. So if you're using the command line, you're going to be doing this on a PC. Same thing in Salesforce Classic. I'll switch over to Classic here. If I go into setup, and again using the quick find, type in data loader, I can go to that, and that'll provide me with that same exact link to download this utility. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that I need to do is I need to encrypt my password that I use to get into Salesforce, and I also need to create an encryption key. And these are going to be used by the configuration file that the data loader uses to run the extract. When I install data loader, I install it in the Salesforce data loader directory, and underneath here there's a bin directory, and here is 2 batch processes, encrypt and process. We're going to use these. Encrypt is going to do the encryption, and process is used by the data loader to actually run the extraction. I also built a working directory called data exports, and this is where I'm going to store my configuration. This process -conf xml is my configuration that I'm going to use, and let's take a look at that. We'll open that up here. This is a listing of the parameters that the data loader needs to run the extract. And you notice in here there's a spot for me to put in my username, and that's where you put in your Salesforce ID, and also there's a place to put in a password. And you notice that I currently have this 0 filled, and we're going to fill that in. You don't store your password as plain text. Instead, you encrypt it. So I'm going to replace all those zeros with an encrypted version of my password to get into Salesforce. Okay, to encrypt my password and to create the encryption key, I'm going to open up a command line prompt, and I'm going to change to the directory where the data loader is installed. In fact, I'm going to go to the bin subdirectory, and so I installed mine at Salesforce/data loader, and then back to the bin subdirectory. And let's take a look at what's in that directory here. So this is where the encrypt batch utility is, and that's what we're going to run. We're going to run this on the command line, and we're going to encrypt the password, first we're going to create an encryption key. And to do that, I'm going to type in encrypt with a -G handle and then a space, and then I'm going to type in some seed text. And this can be any random phrase. I'm literally going to type in any random phrase, but this could be your dog's name, the start of some song they enjoy, or whatever. All we need to do is provide some seed value to create an encryption key. And when I hit enter on this, let me widen this up here. It creates this value right here. We need that. That is our encryption key. We need that to encrypt our password and then to have the utility decrypt our password at run. And so I'm going to copy that out. And I'm going to go to my working directory where I've created that config file. And I'm going to create a new text file here. And I'm going to call this text file key.txt. And I'll open it up, and I'm going to save that encrypted key that we just created at the command line. And we're going to need this both in the configuration file and to create our encrypted password. Okay, so I'm going to take note of the path and the file name here, and I'm going to go back out to the command prompt, and now I'm going to encrypt my password. And to do that, I type in the word encrypt, followed by a space, and then a -E. That's going to be the handle for this. And then another space, and then literally I'm going to type my password. And I don't mean, my password. I mean, type in the password that you use to get into Salesforce. And then another space, and then I'll type in that full path of where we saved our encryption key. And in my case here, it's Salesforce/data exports. And then key.txt. That's the file we saved that in. Okay. And again, that corresponds to that file that we just created over here. It has to match up. So when I hit enter here, it's going to create the encrypted version of my password. And that's what this is over here. And we need that for our configuration file, so I'm going to copy that out. And I go back over to that XML configuration. And where it shows all those zeros, I'm going to paste that encrypted version of our password in there. Okay, so we don't store it as plain text, we store it as encrypted. And so now our configuration file has my user ID and our encrypted password, and then also has the full path to where the encryption key is held. So at runtime, the data loader is able to come up with our credentials to get into Salesforce. So that's how we create an encrypted password and an encryption key. And so now the next step is let's finish working on that configuration file, that process-conf XML file. And we'll go through the parameters that are needed by the data loader to actually perform the extract. So as you look at the top here, I created a process ID called extract widgets, and it also has a property name of the same extract widgets. And so when we run this from the command line, we're actually going to use that extract widgets. It's going to tell, that's what's going to tell the data loader of what to do. There's other parameters in here. These are the servers where Salesforce, where the login is done and where the data is hosted. And if you have a custom domain, that's going to change for you. Also, again, this is my user ID. Our password is stored in here, and then also the encryption key to decrypt our password. And then there's some default settings in here. These are timeout settings and some others that I simply use the default values that were in the sample files provided by Salesforce. I have not changed these. There's plenty of documentation you can read through if you need to change those. And then we need to provide the name of the object that we're going to extract, and in this case it is widget _C, and that is the API name of our widget object in Salesforce. And if it's a custom object, it needs that _. And then this next line, we have a Salesforce object query language query, and it's just a select query. And I did not type this in. There's actually an easy way to get Salesforce to create this for you. You don't have to remember all those fields to build your select statement. You can actually use the regular data loader to create that for you. And I'm going to jump out here and I'll show you that real quick of how I did that. So I'm going to go to where I have my data loader installed, and I'm going to click on the executable, and that starts the data loader, and click on export, and then it's going to ask me to log in, and so I'm going to provide it my my username and my password, and I'm going to log into Salesforce here. And once I log in here, it's going to prompt me to allow to make changes here, and I'm going to just click on the allow and then proceed, and then I'll click on next once I'm logged in, and that shows me my Salesforce objects. Down at the bottom I got the widget object. I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to click next, and in this next screen I'm going to click on select all fields, and as soon as I click on the select all fields button, it automatically builds my select query with all the fields that I've selected there, and I'm going to copy that out. I'm going to go back over to our XML configuration file, and I'm going to paste that query in here. And I've got an extra space here. So that's how I created this. I didn't type that all out. I let the data loader utility build that query for me. I'm going to save this off. And then we want to go close this out. We don't want that running in the background. So that's how I built that. Okay, as we look at the rest of this configuration file, the next line there, we tell it what our operation is going to do, and you can see that there that this is an extract, so I put in extract. And then we provide it with where we want the extract to end up, and so that's the full path of my working directory and the widgets CSV. So when this runs, this is going to create a CSV file for us called widgets. And then we also tell it how to access that file, and this is going to be a write method, so CSV write. And that's it. These are the parameters that go into the configuration file. We're going to save this off, and once again, this file is available for download for you to use and modify on your own. But from here, we're going to use this with the process and run this from the command line and see if it works. Okay, now that I've got our configuration XML file ready to go, running this from the command line is fairly straightforward, and I'm going to jump out to a command prompt here again, and I'm going to change to the directory where I have data loader installed. In fact, I'm going to go to the bin subdirectory because that's where our process batch is, and then I'm going to type in a command, and that command is going to be process and then a space, and then I'm going to type in the path of my working directory, and that's where I saved our process/conf XML file. So I just type in the path to that, and then another space, and then I type in the name of the process that I wanted to run, and that is that extract widgets. That's it. That is the format of the command line of the data loader right there. And when I hit enter on this, it's going to run, and we'll see a bunch of stuff echo off to the screen, and after a few seconds we'll see a message that the operation completed. And there at the bottom there says the operation has fully completed, and it returns me to the command prompt. And if I go back to my working directory, there's our CSV file it created. Open it up, there's a header row and then my 3 records. Okay, so that's running it from the command line. Alright, well, if I want to run this with Windows Task Scheduler or something else, I don't want to have to run it from the command line that every time. I want to create a batch file so I can just call the batch file and have it run, or even click on it if I'm doing this manually. So I'm going to clean this directory up, and I created this run export.bat file. And to run the same process, we can click on that to run the export. And so I'll show you what's inside of here. I literally typed the same things that I did when I went out to the command line prompt. I changed the directory to where the data loader process batch is, and then I typed in that process command line. So the format is process, the path to where the config file is saved, that XML file, and then the name of the process. And so now if I click on this and run it, it'll do the exact same thing, and then we can see it does. And this window will close when this is complete. And we'll give it a second here to complete the process. There, and just like that, and you can see that it created that CSV file again. I'll open it up to make sure we've got records. Yep, the header row and 3 rows of data. Okay, so that's it. That is what the command line looks like, and that's what it's like to run it through a batch file without having to do it from the command prompt. The last 5 minutes or so of this video have to do with troubleshooting. So if you don't want to see anything in troubleshooting, go ahead and stop the video. When I first installed the data loader and went to run it after building my config file, I had some trouble. And so I'm including at the end of this video the steps that I went through to troubleshoot it and the solutions that I came up with. When I was setting this up, I didn't want to have to go out to the command line and type in that whole line every time. And so I ran this from the batch file. And the problem is if you have a problem and you run the batch file, that little window will open and close and you really can't see the statements, and that's what that looks like right there. So to get it so that I could see if there's what the messages were, I modified my batch file. And all I did at the end of this, I typed in a pause command. And then on that second line, instead of have it just go to the process.bat, I did it as a call, and so that makes it return to the pause. And the effect of this is then when this runs, it'll return to press any key to continue, and then it gives me the opportunity to see any error messages that might have popped up. And I'll click on this. I'll run this here so you can see what that looks like. And again, I have this deliberately up so it's going to fail. And it says there at the bottom, press any key to continue. And now I can scroll up and look at all the messages that were echoed while this ran and look for error messages. Okay. And again, I deliberately made this error out so you could just see what this is. But by having that call statement in there and that pause, it gives me the ability to kind of troubleshoot this and to see what the issue is. The first issue that came up for me had to do with the Java home environment variable. And I'll show you that here. When I ran it, it says set the Java home environment variable. And also there was a line above there that kind of indicated to me that it couldn't find the data loader. And after trying several different things and reading some online solutions, what worked for me is I modified my batch file, and I made it so that the first line of my batch file changes to the directory where that process.bat is located. And so for me, that's where I have data loader installed, which is the Salesforce data loader bin directory. So the first line of my batch file changes to that directory, and then I run it from there. And I'll take out that extra line here and I'll rerun this so you can see that that now works. And there we go. I once again created that CSV file. I'll open it up just to verify that I have data. Yeah, there's a header record and the rows. Okay, so for me, to resolve the Java home error, I made the first line of my batch file change the working directory to where process.bat is located. In my case, that was the Salesforce data loader bin directory. I also removed the Java home environment variable from my computer setup. Okay, some other online help will tell you that you need that. For me, the solution was to get rid of it. So by getting rid of that environment variable and starting it from that path, I was able to get this run and got rid of that error. The other issue that I had come up had to do with the login requiring a security token. And I'll show you what that error message looked like here. I'll run this. And as I scroll up through here, I can see an error message. And I'll highlight it here. It says login must use security token. Okay, so what this is telling me is that in addition to my password, it wants me to append a security token onto my password. Well, that's fine, but our organization doesn't use those. We don't have that second factor set up in our setups. And so to get around this, I went into our setup and I went to the network access settings. And I added the IP address of the computer that I'm using to run this data loader. I added that to the trusted IP range. And what that does is it simply makes it so that you don't have to have that second level of authentication here. You don't need the security token. So I entered in my IP address, and then I'll rerun this here so you can see that I no longer get that message. And there again is our CSV file that it just created. And once again, I'll open it up and verify that I have the data. Yep, there's my header row and the 3 records. Okay, so for me, when I got that error message related to I needed a security token. I added the IP address of the computer I was using to run the data loader to the trusted IP range in the network access setup in Salesforce. Alternatively, I could have enabled the two-factor authentication for user interface logins in my Salesforce profile, generated a security token, and encrypted my password with the appended security token and entered it into my process config file. And then just one last thing, when you're done troubleshooting and everything's working, go back to your batch file and get rid of that call statement and get rid of that pause so that when you run this from Windows Task Scheduler or something else, that it doesn't get hung up on that last pause command and expecting someone to hit a key to continue. That's the end of our video. I hope that you found something useful here. And again, if you want copies of my config file or that batch file, go to flyingpuma.com, click on the links tab, and you can download that zip file.